Since 1986, the University of Tennessee Procurement Technical Assistance Center, or PTAC, has helped small businesses win federal, state, and local government contracts. UT-PTAC is part of a network of organizations located in all 50 states and funded by the Defense Logistics Agency. Assistance includes one-on-one counseling, training seminars, and sponsorships of major procurement matchmaking events. Large businesses benefit from the services as well through referrals of qualified small business subcontractors. For additional information, go to www.ptac.tennessee.edu or www.aptac-us.org. For the past 30 years, the Tennessee Small Business Development Center Network has helped small business owners, entrepreneurs, and individuals develop business ideas to compete in the global marketplace. TSBDC has a network of certified professional business counselors located in a community near you. The TSBDC provides a wide range of services for entrepreneurs, including free confidential counseling, as well as training seminars on numerous business-related topics. To learn more about the network, please visit www.tsbdc.org.
Great. Thank you, Albert. And thanks for everybody who has joined this morning. We've got folks still kind of coming into the meeting room, and so I'll give a little bit of background overview about myself, and then we'll get into the program itself. First and foremost, I want to thank UT-PTAC and SBDC Tennessee for inviting me to participate in today's webinar. Both organizations have been a great partner to myself and my practice group here in Washington, D.C. over the last several years, and we appreciate the partnership and opportunity to reach out to government contractors, not only in the state of Tennessee, but throughout the Southeast. So again, thank you very much. As Albert mentioned, this is a webinar. I give a couple webinars a year. I'd like to be more in person when possible, but in a webinar format, you're here to get information, and hopefully I can provide that information to you today. But also I do invite questions so that we can have some semblance of kind of decorum for today. I do ask that you chat those questions to Debbie. If there are questions that then Debbie will feed to me kind of halfway through, we will try to get those questions answered. And if for some reason your question is not answered today, my contact information will be available at the end, and I welcome people to reach out and to email me or call me, and I'm happy to work through any questions that you might have. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started with the program itself. If I can. All right, so today, let me just kind of give you an overview of what I hope to cover. This is a presentation I've given several times over the last 6 to 9 months by myself, with others, and even with SBA officials recently down in Florida. And there's always new things that I learn in giving this presentation. So again, I'm anxious for your thoughts and questions throughout the morning today. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a little background on this rule and how it came to be. It was a long time coming. And then I'm going to walk through what not only what the regulations say, but what I also think are the benefits of this new program, not only for mentors, but also for proteges. Talk specifically about the guidelines as to how you qualify as a protege and a mentor. Then talk through the SBA's approval process, as well as to talk briefly about the appeal process. Given what SBA is doing and the speed they're doing, I'm not sure the appeal process will be that necessary, but it is there for folks to utilize. I then want to talk a little bit about, I'm a lawyer, so I gotta scare you a little bit, and I wanted to emphasize the penalties for not complying with the agreements that folks sign up to. I think with this new program, there's lots of exciting opportunities, but SBA is going to enforce and oversee the program and make sure that the benefits that have been promised to proteges are actually being provided. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about reporting requirements that come along with it, so you can get your mentor-protege agreement renewed and approved for additional time period. And I'm going to stop, and we're going to hopefully take any questions about the Mentor-Protege program. And then the back half of this presentation, we'll talk about what I think a lot of mentors are excited about, are forming and pursuing contracts underneath a Mentor-Protege agreement as a joint venture with their protege partner. So with that, I did want to kind of start with, and again, to complement SBA on their communication of this program. You can go to SBA's website today. They've got this All Small program highlighted on their main page. You see, click here to go and check out what the SBA has to offer, and they do have some very good information on the website itself. Now, the All Small program, as it's called, began accepting applications for the Mentor-Protege agreements on October 1st of 2016. After the first month or so, they no longer accepted any paper applications, and we'll talk more about the application itself. And everything is now done online via certified.sba.gov. And those of you in other socioeconomic programs may have utilized that portal for providing information about your business. And so this is they're consolidating the use of that portal, and this is where you put in your information for the Mentor-Protege agreement. You can see here on the lower left-hand corner, again, they've got background information about the All Small program, highlights the eligibility requirements, and then they'll walk you through the application process on their website. This website also contains a list of approved Mentor-Protege agreements. As I note here on the next slide, as I checked yesterday, they are at slightly more than 185 approved agreements. I'm not very good at math, but that's gosh, in 6-9 months, that's about 20 or so applications a month that they're approving, which is, I think, fantastic. I heard back in May during my meeting when I spoke with an SBA official that as of then they'd only declined 17 applications. I think most of those were just for technical errors to go back and people have a chance to review their submission. Now, let me just before I jump too much into the program, I do think it's important to remember where we've come from. And I think this is important to keep in mind because there's been a lot of talk about this program for a number of years, and therefore I think there's a lot of pent-up desire for it, and I think that may be why you've seen so many agreements get approved so quickly. But this idea first came about back in the Small Business Jobs Act of 2010, where this idea of a kind of parallel mentor-protege program for all small business concerns would be made available. It got further authorization in the NDAA of 2013, where they specifically said, look, let's go out and do this. We need to get a proposed rule in place to give us this very similar program to what already existed for 8As. The proposed rule came out in February of 2015. There were a number of things in the proposed rule that people liked and some things that people didn't like. SBA received quite a number of comments about this proposed rule. They then digested those comments and revised their rulemaking and issued the final rule, which was effective August 24th of 2016. And as I noted, they began accepting applications in October of last year. Now, if you can't get enough of me in this hour or so we're together, you can also go online to SBA's website. They have an online tutorial that they take you through in addition to some required training you have to go through. So you can, as you can see, they've had quite a number of online views already of that material. So as I mentioned, what this program is all about is it is one program for all small businesses. And 8As can participate as well, but it's for just normal small businesses, women-owned small businesses, SWSBs, HubZone, everything. And it is intended, as I mentioned, to mirror what has been provided within the 8A world for some time. And so as we talk through a number of these things, I'll try to highlight the differences. There's not that many, but it's very similar to what exists today for the 8A. Now, SBA was very clear in its final rulemaking that as of today, and there's no additional rulemaking, there's been no changes to how SBA processes 8A mentor-protege agreements and joint ventures. That program still exists. They're still processing applications and approving joint ventures for 8A procurements. What also came about in this final rule, and I think this has been a little bit more slow to develop, and SBA I think has been a little more patient with this, but the NDA made clear in 2013 that really only SBA was supposed to have approved mentor-protege agreements. The only exception was DOD's technically pilot program. It's still called the pilot program, but the SBA is supposed to be gathering input from the other agencies' mentor-protege programs and either phasing out those mentor-protege programs or somehow bringing those benefits into the SBA approved all small program. Partly, I think, because there's just a lot of confusion out there as to what's the benefit of an agency-specific mentor-protege program versus the SBA, and there are some differences, but I think there's an effort by SBA to gather input from other agencies in regards to their mentor-protege programs before those agencies' programs are actually phased out. So what are the benefits? I'm sure there's plenty of people on the phone who may have looked at this already or may have experienced this through the 8A program, but I do think it's important to highlight what are the real benefits and purpose of this program. It goes back to, it's another vehicle that SBA has devised to provide certain types of assistance to small businesses. And that mentors can provide this assistance to their proteges with free of charge, as well as I note here at the bottom, all of it can be provided without an affiliation concern. Affiliation meaning that you are permitted to provide these assistance to small businesses and work with those small businesses in a framework where if you did not have this mentor-protege agreement behind you, someone could argue that the mentor and protege should be viewed as affiliates, and therefore you could destroy the protege's small business status. So some of the assistance that can be provided is specifically called out technical and management assistance. So you can think of all sorts of things that could fall underneath technical and management assistance to a protege firm. Financial assistance through loans, investments. You can buy up to 40% of a protege and not have an affiliation concern. It could be other forms of financial assistance, reimbursement of lawyers' fees, things like that related to joint venture development. Developmental assistance, those through the awarding of subcontracts back and forth between the mentor and protege, particularly if the protege is looking to develop business in a certain NAICS code or business category. And then we'll talk more about assistance in performing prime contracts through your JV agreements. And then lastly is trade education, which is kind of broadly intended to be to the extent a protege is looking to develop work overseas, that a mentor can help them develop the expertise in that space. So when all this benefits or assistance is provided, what is it supposed to do? Obviously, it's supposed to improve the small business and the small business development and along its life cycle. It also has the benefit, I think, of increasing small business opportunities, because not only do you have proteges getting assistance and being better prepared to go after set-aside contracts on their own, but through the JV relationships, you can obviously go after more set-asides as being together. You do have the ability under this program to transfer from the 8A Mentor-Protege program to the new All Small program. So that's a benefit provided to 8A companies. And the potential for kind of the agency-specific Mentor-Protege benefit, which is the evaluation credit that on subcontracts that are awarded to protégés. That's not a specific benefit yet in the program, but that would be something I think SBA would consider adding to its program so it could capture some of the benefits that other agency-specific mentor-protégé programs provide. So how do I qualify as a protégé? Well, fortunately, the final rule kept the general concept of protégés being able to self-certify that they are a small business. So that's the first thing, and they must meet the size standard of their primary NAICS code, as you would on a prime contract, or be seeking specific assistance from a mentor under the secondary NAICS code. And so that's important because you can have up to 2 mentors at a time, and they need to be one in your primary and one in your secondary. Also, what's important now for protégés is that a protégé can be a protégé and have up to 2 mentors at a time, but it could also be a mentor. So if you've got if you're from a company that is quickly moving up its size within its primary NAICS code, and you're interested in mentoring a small business or a startup that you have in your community, you can play both roles at the same time. And as I mentioned, you can only have a maximum of 2 mentors at a particular time. Guidelines for mentors. So you must be a for-profit business concern. There was not-for-profits were permitted before, but you must be a for-profit business concern. As I mentioned, you can either be a small or large business. You must show that you can fulfill your obligations under the mentor-protégé agreement. Now, there's no specific requirement to provide, financial information or balance sheet information or anything like that. It's more you're demonstrating it through your basically your signature on the mentor-protégé agreement. And if there are specific questions the SBA has, you can address those questions prior to agreement approval. You also must possess good character, which basically means that you're not on the excluded parties list, which means you've not been suspended or debarred. And I want to mention again this important kind of point at the end. One of the things that was considered in the proposed rule was that mentors would have to provide a kind of evidence of good financial condition, and that requirement was taken away, which I think was a good move just because that's something that might have been a barrier to entry for some mentors. So for mentors, they can have up to 3 protégés at any one point in time. Now, the default is to have 1, but SBA will approve up to 3 protégés that are not competitors. And so my advice to mentors is that if you're looking to have more than 1 protégé, you need to be looking at really different NAICS codes. That's a good place to start. Or be prepared to demonstrate that even if they're in the same NAICS code, that your protégés are in a different kind of subcategory of that NAICS code, have a different specialty, have a different client focus, whatever it might be, but you have to demonstrate that they're not competitors in order for SBA to approve more than 1. Now, I mentioned that a mentor can make financial investments in the protégé, and they can own up to 40% in the protégé and have that ownership protected by the affiliation regulations, meaning that you can have an ownership stake, be providing all this sorts of assistance, and it not trigger kind of a dominant minority owner concern from an affiliation perspective. Now, you're not required to divest this interest at the end of the mentor-protégé agreement, but with the mentor-protégé agreement not in place, you lose the affiliation protections. You just have to be a little bit careful as to what sort of other involvement you have with the protégé post your mentor-protégé agreement. And as I already mentioned here, the protégé can mentor smaller, less experienced firms, and frankly, I have a number of small to mid-sized clients that are looking to be both a protege and a mentor. This is kind of highlighting one of the potential kind of risk areas I highlight to mentors, is that SBA was very specific in their final rule about additional kind of subvention and debarment authority for failure to comply with the terms of a mentor-protege agreement. And they specifically highlight certain areas by which I think it's good for mentors to keep in mind to not find themselves in suspension debarment risk. It is a very grave measure, but I think it highlights that SBA is serious about this new suspension debarment authority. So first and foremost, failing to provide agreed assistance to protege. And what that suggests to me and what I tell mentors is, look, don't overpromise. Work with the protege carefully, identify the assistance that a mentor can provide that protege needs, and offer that assistance. Don't offer the farm and expect to only provide a little bit of that. You really need to be more specific with the assistance that you want to provide. Obviously, changing the mentor-protege agreement without SBA approval, that can lead you into trouble. You're supposed to get their approval with any changes to the agreement. And then failure to submit a certification of compliance, which we'll talk more about later, could also be a basis for a suspension debarment. But I think the real issue here is they've had situations in the 8A program over the years where benefits have been promised by mentors, they've not been provided. There's been disputes that develop between the mentors and proteges, and this has been SBA's way of signaling that they really want people to take this seriously when they enter into these agreements. So how do I get one of these, and what's the approval process? So I now have met a couple folks within this new unit within the SBA's Office of Business Development, and as I understand it, they are staffed up. There's a director and a deputy director and 3 staff members who their really sole function over the last 6 to 9 months has been reviewing and approving applications. There's going to be other things they have to worry about as they begin to review and renew agreements on down the road. But it is a staffed up organization. I'm not sure if they're fully staffed, but they're doing a great job with the folks that they have so far. Right now, it's an open enrollment period. And the reason I wanted to highlight this was there is this, depending on the amount of applications they get, SBA was considering having a kind of an open versus closed enrollment period, kind of like the SBIR program, where you would have a certain number of months to submit your application and then it would close and then they would open it back up later. But right now, it's open, it's rolling. You're able to submit your application online and get it reviewed and approved. The final decision is made by the SBA Associate Administrator for Business Development, and the term that is agreed to for the initial agreement is 3 years. Now, that agreement is reviewed annually by the SBA to ensure that the terms and benefits being provided are actually being provided, but the initial term is 3 years. If during that first 3-year span everything is going well, SBA does have the authority to extend it for an additional term of 3 years, again, reviewed annually. How to apply. As I've already mentioned, it's through certify.sba.gov. Again, there's a preparation checklist made available on the website for you to kind of go through the documents you need to provide. Both parties must have an active registration in SAM. That makes sense. Both parties must complete the 30-minute online training module and then provide the certificate of completion. And then the protege, this has probably been I think if there's been a slowdown or stumbling block for parties, this is probably it. A protege is required to submit a business plan with the application. Now that's, for those 8A companies on the phone, you all are used to that. You have a business plan requirement as part of the 8A program. For non-8A small businesses, you may or may not have a business plan that you look at on an annual basis or complete on an annual basis. But what SBA I think is trying to get companies to do through this requirement is to think about what it is what the hopes and dreams are for their business, what areas they want to grow, and to think through, therefore, what sorts of assistance could a particular mentor actually provide to help us get there. And so I like to tell folks that, well, this is a great chance to sit down and even work with a mentor on a business plan, or work with a couple mentors on a business plan, and to think more globally about where your small business is headed and what your dreams are. And then when you have that business plan, say, okay, well, what certain benefits could the mentor provide? I do not believe that SBA is looking for the mentor to provide every benefit in that business plan, but rather how does the benefits that the mentor is providing fit into the overall plan and goals of the small business. This is where you would go for the tutorial. You can see here, this is the tutorial that you need to take in order to do your certificate of completion and have that provided as part of your application. Now, the last piece of the application, in addition to the items I just talked about, is a written mentor-protege agreement. Now, fortunately, the SBA is providing a template on sba.gov of the All Small Mentor-Protégé Agreement. It is based in large part upon the template that has existed for a while for the 8A program, and it does track the regulations that are required for the content of a mentor-protégé agreement. And what it must include are, as we've been talking about, the protege's projected needs and benefits as to what it's looking for. And then with a little bit more level of detail, the methods, timeline, and mode for measuring success of the assistance that the mentor is providing to meet those needs. You've got to provide a mentor point of contact that will manage and implement the agreement. So someone within the mentor's organization is going to be responsible for making sure the assistance is provided. The mentor is making at least a 1-year commitment to the protege in the agreement. And there's a specific termination clause as to how each side can get out of the agreement, as well as how the SBA can terminate the agreement on its own. But again, really the only thing that the mentor and protege really need to modify in the, only need to modify in the agreement is the needs, benefits, and methods and timeline for measuring the mentor's success. And SBA does provide kind of a chart for folks to use and complete there. So as I mentioned, SBA's approved quite a number of these and had only a few denied. And I think most of the denials have been, you need to provide a business plan or you need to provide more detail. But to the extent that you feel like you've provided a completed application, you can request review. You can file a request for reconsideration within 45 calendar days of the notice, provide additional documentation. SBA then will issue a written decision within 45 calendar days. I don't think the appeal process has been formally used yet. My sense is that the team within the new business unit at SBA is willing and capable to work with folks to try to make changes to the extent that parties are willing to make changes. As I mentioned, changes and termination. So SBA is, once they approve this agreement, they are very particular about any changes. And I think really what they're focused on is changes to the benefits and the assistance that have been agreed to and approved by the SBA. And so any change must be submitted and approved in writing in advance to the SBA. So again, working through this office and getting them to approve your change. And a protege must certify the SBA on an annual basis whether or not the mentor-protege agreement has been altered. And so the protege itself is saying, well, no, everything's the same, but if changes have been made, they need to go through the SBA office. If SBA finds unapproved changes in their annual review, the regulations say they shall terminate the agreement. So again, need to make sure that if there's a certain type of assistance that the mentor can no longer provide, or there's something the protege feels like they really need and the mentor wants to give it to them, you really need to go through the approval process with SBA. SBA can also terminate the mentor-protege agreement at any time, if the parties don't comply with the terms and conditions of the agreement, and if SBA determines that the protege is not benefiting from the agreement. Hopefully that won't happen, but I think that is a kind of a safety valve SBA has to enforce the terms of the agreement. There is a change of control provision for the mentor. So if a mentor undergoes a sale process, that new mentor must certify in writing that it will honor the terms of the mentor-protege agreement. There's no change of control provision on the protege side of this at this stage, but I think that might be something SBA fixes in the future. But really, they're looking for the mentor the new owner or new mentor to confirm that they'll still honor the benefits the mentors offer to provide. Now, sorry, this keeps changing. SBA will notify a mentor if SBA deems the assistance that the mentor is providing to be inadequate. So this would likely occur during the annual review process, where if SBA has determined that they haven't met the means and modes and timeline laid out in the agreement, they give the mentor 30 days to explain and provide a plan going forward. There could be reasons why the mentor couldn't provide the assistance as contemplated a year earlier. Could have had a downturn in business, could have had an uptick in business, could have had all sorts of things. People left, different priorities. So you have time to explain and also a plan for going forward. A plan could be how you're going to meet it, how you may need to modify the agreement, whatever, but a plan going forward. If you're not able to provide that plan and SBA doesn't deem the response to be adequate, penalties could include obviously termination of that agreement. Also an ineligibility to serve as a mentor for the next 2 years. I think that's a little bit short of than the suspension debarment authority that we've already talked about. This could be just a basis that they look to as for suspension debarment. Reporting requirements. With added benefits, there's also, of course, some compliance and reporting that comes along with it. So within 30 days of your agreement anniversary, the protege must report to the SBA details on how the mentor has assisted the protege during that year, disclose contracts and subcontracts that have been awarded between the parties, as well as contracts that the mentor may have helped support from a business development perspective, so on and so forth for the protege. And the report should really focus on whether or not SBA should extend the mentor-protege agreement. That is, renew it for the next year. This is the report that SBA will be getting to conduct its review. If the protege does not provide the report, the protege could be prevented from future program involvement, and of course you could see termination of the agreement. As I mentioned before, SBA can extend a mentor-protege agreement for a second 3-year term if that report that the protege has provided demonstrates the protege has benefited from the relationship, and after 3 years the protege will continue to benefit from the relationship if the agreement is extended and the same type of benefits are being provided. All right, I'm going to stop there. We're about 30 minutes in to the webinar to see if there's any specific questions on the mentor-protege agreement itself, application process, affiliation exception, anything folks might have on the mentor-protege agreement itself.
And I will remind the attendees that you'll need to unmute your mic before you ask the question.
I have a question, Todd. This is Lori Walters. Do you have to set up a joint venture as well? Well, you just showed it here, I guess. If you have a mentor-protege program in place with a prime, for any solicitation that you're going after, you still need to set up that joint venture. Is that correct?
Yes. So it's a great segue into the next portion of the presentation. But what I think of is you've got to have the mentor-protege agreement in place first and foremost. And if there's a solicitation out there that you as the protege want to bid on as your own, you are free to do that, obviously, at any time. You are also, to the extent that your mentor-protege agreement talks about how the mentor is going to help you with BD on certain types of proposals, the mentor can help you write your proposal. To the extent you want to use that mentor as a subcontractor on that set-aside contract, and you've identified it in your mentor-protege agreement, you can use them as your subcontractor with no simple subcontractor concerns. Now, if there's something that the two of you want to bid on together as a prime, then that's where you would use the joint venture. And I would say that those are situations where maybe it's a larger set-aside contract.
Right.
It's a contract that the mentor has certain quals that you don't have. Mm-hmm. So that's when you would set up your joint venture to go after a specific opportunity.
Can you use that for responding to a sources sought if it's for maybe an 8A set aside, if you, like we are an 8A company?
Yes, if you form the joint venture, you could have the joint venture respond to a sources sought. Yes.
Okay. Because to me, I'm trying to understand the difference between the all small business mentor-protege versus the mentor-protege. You know, that's a big advantage to the 8A program. So really, having the mentor-protege as an 8A firm, I guess that just means that it allows you both to go after the 8A set aside.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yes.
Todd, good morning. If you're finished with your question, I have a question. My question is this: can you be a mentor and be a protege on a different mentor-protege relationship? Can you be both?
Yes.
Okay.
You can.
Can you, how many mentor-protege relationships can you have either as a mentor or a protege?
So a mentor can have up to 3 proteges, and a protege can have up to two mentors, and that's between both programs. Now, when I say both programs, I mean SBA's programs. Your agency-specific mentor-protege programs,
right, mm-hmm.
do not offer the same sorts of benefits as the SBA programs. Your agency-specific, your DOE, your HUD,
right.
your whatever, they're offering basically evaluation credit. That's really all they can really offer. They cannot offer the affiliation exception for benefits provided and or for the joint ventures created. That's why SBA is trying to, I'd say, phase out agency-specific mentor-protege programs and build those benefits into the SBA programs.
So let me repeat what you said, see if I understood it correctly. So as a mentor, we could have up to 3 proteges.
Yep.
With the same business plan, but 3 mentor-protege agreements.
Yes, a mentor does not require a business plan. Only the protege requires a business plan.
Good point. So if I flip that around, as a protege, we could be a protege to 2 different mentors with the same business plan?
Yes.
Okay.
But just make sure that yes, at the same time. Now just make sure that those mentors can fill different aspects of your business plan, and what SBA be looking at from the protege to 2 mentors is one mentor would be in your primary NAICS and the other mentor would likely be in a secondary NAICS.
Well, the way we're looking at that is that with one mentor, we're looking at a particular market area and technology, with another mentor a different market area and technology. That would qualify?
Again, the SBA is going to look for NAICS codes. They're going to focus on NAICS codes. So
okay.
yeah. So if the industry, the market is in the same NAICS code, you may run into a problem that SBA says, well, I'll approve one, but your other one's got to be in a different NAICS code.
What about PSC codes? Is that enough of a separation?
Could be. Again, just have to demonstrate it to SBA.
Understood. Thank you.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. If I could chime in again, I just want to make sure I've got that clear. I'm getting into my hard head here. If you're a protege and you have two mentors, one has to be in your primary NAICS code, and the other needs to be in the secondary?
In a secondary, yes. And you need to be seeking specific, let's say your primary NAICS code is IT services, and you've got a mentor lined up for that, and you've got specific things you're looking for to help grow the business there. But then let's say you've got another line of business where you've had this interest in audit services, you got a background in audit services, and it's a secondary NAICS code. Well, you find a different mentor, and they can provide certain types of assistance in that NAICS code. It's really, I think, intended to help small businesses think about, okay, what are you thinking about today, and what are you thinking about tomorrow? And it's really that secondary NAICS code that is really tomorrow's kind of goal, and you could find a different mentor who could help you in that space.
Okay. So you can't maybe in your business plan, it can't be that one mentor you're looking for help in some aspects, maybe marketing and manpower as you staff up, whereas the other mentor you might be looking at accounting systems and helping help with education on growing your company.
Yeah. I mean, that's not the way the rule's written. The rule is written, it's supposed to be primary versus secondary.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right. So let me switch gears here to I think the aspect of this that I think I would hope is equally exciting to mentors and proteges. As a lawyer, I don't have any illustrating skills, but here's my attempt at some graphics here on this slide with the mentor plus protege equals a larger circle, which is supposed to be your joint venture. And it's the only opportunity for other than small businesses or a large business to share a prime contractor role on small business set-asides. Not only just normal small business set-asides, but also SDVOSB set-aside, subzone, woman-owned small business. That JV combined can qualify as small for a particular NAICS code and set-asides, not only for prime contracts, but also for subcontracts. I think sometimes people forget about that other angle, is the opportunity to walk into a Lockheed Martin or a Bechtel and say, hey, look, I've got this JV, we're going after this prime, but I could also be considered a small business for your subcontracting plan. It's another angle to think about for the use of that joint venture. We'll talk a bit more about what SBA's rules are on this unique opportunity. Again, this is modeled a lot after the 8A program, which for those of you in the DOE community, DOE I think has been a good steward of the use of 8A mentor-protege joint ventures over the years for certain types of contracts, and it's actually encouraged their development on certain procurements. Under SBA's rules, the joint venture can be a formal legal entity, or it still can be an informal partnership. Now, I will counsel my small protege clients or my large mentors as your lawyer to always form a legal entity. Now, legal entities do bring additional costs, but as I mentioned before, those costs could be covered or reimbursed via the mentor-protege agreement so that the mentor is shouldering that cost burden. But again, legal entity is going to protect, the protege is going to protect the mentor more than an informal partnership. So that joint venture must be separately identified in SAM. It's got to have a separate DUNS and a cage code. And you need to identify it as an entity type as a joint venture in the SAM profile. And you also should list the individual joint venture partners in your SAM profile. Now, the JV agreement must be in writing and identify certain things that the regulations require. And the regulations for the all small JVs that look very similar to the regulations for the 8A program. And you would identify these specific things, particularly if you form a formal legal entity, in your operating agreement. Let's say you do an LLC, you have your operating agreement as to how the LLC is going to function, and you would build in these requirements within your operating agreement. I even have kind of a chart at the front of the operating agreement where we identify the various regulations and then kind of correspond to what section in the operating agreement they each is addressed, just so it's clear to everybody that we identified these things up front. So real quickly here, it's got to be in writing. It's got to identify the purpose of the joint venture, what the JV is going to go and do, what type of contracts it's going to get, and what specific responsibilities each joint venture partner is going to have to, let's just call it the LLC. It has to specifically identify the protege as the managing venturer of the joint venture. It also has to identify an employee of the protege as the program manager for contract performance. So contracts the JV wins. You got to have a special bank account set up for the joint venture. I'll come back to the next bullet here in a minute. The protege office must retain the accounting and admin records, and the JV has to submit and be able to prepare financial statements and profit and loss statements. So again, it's got to have some sort of accounting resource available to it. Now, the bullet I skipped, equipment, facilities, and resources have to be itemized. This has been the subject of a number of SBA OHA decisions as to how specific this has to be, as well as been some modifications to the regulations to permit some adjustments here. This is probably the hardest thing for parties to do when you don't even know yet necessarily what the solicitation is going to look like, what exactly the parties will bring into the table, what your proposal is going to look like. And so what I tell folks is, and what if it's an IDIQ contract and you're going after orders? So what I tell folks is that you need to be able to identify upfront, and you should know at least generally the types of things that each side is going to be willing to bring to the table. But this is something to not forget as you are beginning to develop your proposal, that you can amend your joint venture agreement through an addendum to be more specific as to the equipment, facilities, and resources that a party is going to provide for a particular contract opportunity. That should be folded in to your LLC agreement prior to contract award. So with the new regulation state, and they've had a couple adjustments to this since they came out, that the protege must receive profits from the joint venture commensurate with its percentage of work performed. We'll get back to that in a minute. Now, if I'm telling you to do a separate legal entity, that separate legal entity, the protege must own at least 51% of, if it's an LLC, the membership interests. And also for separate legal entities, you cannot populate that joint venture with other than administrative staff to the extent you need them. The reason being is that SBA wants to monitor performance of work requirements via the subcontracts that the JV would then issue to not only the JV partners, but to other third parties. Now, a small business partner to the joint venture must perform at least 40% of substantive work of the contract that the JV receives. So what that means is that if the protege decides to do 45% of the substantive work with its own employees, then it only needs to receive 45% of the profits. And again, that is attractive to some mentors because the mentors can perform more than the typical 50% mark as you would in a normal set aside. The protege must document how it's meeting the performance of work requirements, not only on an annual basis, but also as part of a post-contract reporting process. Now, what's a little different, and I think it's a good thing for all small joint ventures, is that under the All Small program, entities or the JV must be, the parties to the joint venture agreement must have an approved mentor-protege agreement before you submit your offer for a set-aside. Okay? So that's why I think it's important you get the mentor-protege agreement in place first, and then you would form your JV, and then you would submit an offer for a set-aside. You are not required to have JV approval prior to offer submission. Now, for an 8A contract, as we all know, you're required to have your 8A joint venture approved prior to contract award. That process is still in place. You are still, for an 8A contract, you have to have your joint venture approved by the SBA. But for all small joint ventures, all you have to do prior to contract award is that certify to the contracting officer that you're going to comply with the joint venture regulations as well as the All Small Mentor-Protege Agreement regulations. An important change is that for past performance, previously this was something that really depended upon what the RFP said, and generally would say, well, we're going to judge your past performance based upon what the joint venture has done. Well, that's no good when the joint venture was formed for the purpose of getting the contract. Now the regulations state, and therefore RFPs should also follow, that past performance of the individual JV partners will be looked at. Obviously, that can be good and bad. If particularly if the mentor and protege each have past performance for a particular contract type, that's great. If you don't have it, you'll get a neutral. It won't be as helpful, but it's now good to have some clarity on what sort of past performance evaluation should take place for a joint venture. So I'm going to wrap up here with just a couple kind of best practices, and then I'll take some additional questions. I've given this talk, like I mentioned, actually all over the state of Tennessee, now a couple times down in South Florida. And, this is all great to hear from, a lawyer, but I think the hard part is actually finding somebody you trust and you want to do business with. And so what I tell people is, based on my experience, is, finding the match up front may be the hardest part of this process. The rest of it, I think, could be fairly not only self-explanatory, but also, I think, pretty easy to get through. But I would look at finding that partner just like I'd be, finding somebody who I might sell my business to or make an investment in. I would perform due diligence on them. I would get any sort of background information I can. I'd scour public sources of information, contract wins, so on and so forth, to figure out who my mentor or my protege could be. As we've talked already about on the phone, thinking about strategic considerations as to which NAICS codes, what types of things you're looking to do, and how you're going to grow. I'd weigh those things before you start investing the time and money in going through the process of putting together the protege agreement, getting it approved, and then potentially, to the extent going after a joint venture together. I think you can see on the SBA website, as I mentioned, that 185 plus agreements already approved. It's quite a variety of business sizes and types and socioeconomic categories. So there's a lot of people out there doing this, at least getting the mentor-protege agreement in place. And I believe the last I heard is that the SBA in this new unit is processing and approving agreements within like 8 to 10 business days, which when I heard that, I nearly fell on the floor. That may slow down as the volume increases, but right now they're getting back to people very quickly. And to the extent there's a prime or a subcontract opportunity you want to form a joint venture to go after together, I'd do it. There's a lot of people out there forming these agreements. and pursuing contracts because the mentor wants to be able to participate, on a set-aside type procurement. And remember, you've got to get, for 8A set-asides only, you've got to get that JV agreement approved before contract award, and that would go through your normal 8A boss specialist. Now, lastly, we've tried to scare you a little bit on the suspension debarment risk as well as the SBA oversight. As I understand it, it is this office that will be doing the initial review. They can, of course, refer matters to their SBA OIG if they need to, but it all starts with being prompt with your annual and your end of relationship reporting requirements. And really a lot of that falls on the protege. And so to the extent you need assistance with that, put that in your mentor-protege agreement, that the mentor will help tracking and provide data so that those reports can be completed and submitted in a timely fashion. That's the last of my prepared remarks. I told Debbie that I would try to finish around 11, take some questions. I'll give people some time back. I did want to provide my contact information. This is my team here in Washington. I don't work there in the Capitol, but just down the street from the Capitol. There's my contact information, and we have a blog that we routinely post articles of interest to not only government contractors, but also the companies that are in the international trade space. And so if you'd like to check us out, and you can subscribe and we do 6 to 10 blog postings a month. So with that, I'll stop and take any additional questions on all small JVs or on any other part of the program.
This is Keith. I asked some questions before, and sorry to monopolize, but I have another one if I may. Regarding contract vehicles, the mentor and the protege, as they come together, they may be a prime on different contract vehicles. We're able to use our past performance on those vehicles, I presume. Or what's the treatment of contract vehicles in a mentor-protege joint venture?
I mean, you would, like any sort of past performance reference, you would be citing to work performed under your other contract vehicles. So if you had a OASIS, and you had an OASIS task order you wanted to cite to, then you could cite to that.
Well, let me ask the question differently. If one of the ventures has the OASIS vehicle as a prime, can the venture use the OASIS vehicle?
No. Remember, the joint venture is either a separate legal entity or an informal partnership, and the government is going to award the contract to the joint venture as the prime contractor. You can't utilize a contract vehicle of another party to try and win work. That party can bid on its own because the government's going to be looking to who is the entity performing the contract. And if it's a vehicle the protege has, then the protege can submit a bid. It can utilize the mentor as a subcontractor, but the JV itself can't utilize contract vehicles of the other parties for contract performance. For past performance, yes, but not for contract performance.
Understood. Thank you.
One thing I did want to mention that I've been looking into for clients recently is questions regarding service-disabled veteran-owned joint ventures underneath the All Small program. And I think that there are still some issues to work out, syncing SBA's regulations with the VA's regulations. Because in order for a joint venture under the All Small program to qualify as an SDVO for a VA set-aside, it's a mouthful, as many of you know on the phone, the VA has their own certification program through the Vet Biz program. That joint venture would need to go through the Vet Biz program to get verified for a VA set-aside. And the regulations are not, particularly on performance of work, are not in concert yet in between the SBA rules and the VA rules. The VA had put on its website a PDF document that was actually updated in May of this year. They apparently have taken down now. So I think there's some, again, they're trying to figure out these inconsistencies. So I would just counsel those that if you're considering forming a joint venture, that you want to qualify as an SDVO small business for a VA set aside, that there's still some open issues regarding, I think, ownership and performance of work requirements that are still being, I think, worked through. Other questions, comments? Well, again, I want to thank, we had nearly 40 folks here on the phone today, so I want to thank you all very much for tuning in. Again, thank you to our partners, UT-PTAC and SBDC, for this opportunity. And again, feel free to reach out to me on questions or send me an email. I'd be happy to chat more about this program. Have a great rest of your week. Thanks so much.